What AWS does is allows us to devote all of our mind share to our customers instead of to managing a bunch of server infrastructure, which, while important, isn't most core to our business.
它带给我们了更加便捷的、更加能够充分的共享、更加能够快捷的让我们了解到我们在全球的市场它发生了什么事情，我们如何更好的快速反应进行决策。对于我们带来的一个更大的惊喜是，它是以小时收费的，带给我们的成本的巨大的下降。
AWS is like having a giant, super talented engineering and operations team at your beck and call.
E a AWS vem propiciar flexibilidade, em termos de escalabilidade, em termos de segurança, para que a gente possa estar tendo essa infraestrutura para suportar esse crescimento que acontece num único dia, num único final de semana.
If Amazon Web Services were taken away from us, I would burst into tears. I would burst into tears, a lot of my colleagues would burst into tears, and what really would happen is everything would slow down.
My team recently went to cloud school, courtesy of AWS, and straight away we're looking at different things we can do and different products we can use. We kind of expand our usage of the platform as we go forward.
AWS has already helped us achieve speed to market. We have been able to deploy applications in less than 3 weeks, and we have also been able to reduce cost by more than 80%.
Amazon Web Services entwickelt sich einfach wahnsinnig schnell, ähnlich wie ein Startup. Ist kostengünstig, flexibel. Wir haben eine großartige Partnerschaft mit Amazon Web Services und sind deshalb 100% zufrieden.
When you say web scale, what you're really saying is can scale to infinity, and that's not actually true ever, but AWS comes as close to being true as anything that actually exists on the web today.
Welcome everyone, thanks for joining. We are coming to you today from Germany. In fact, we are here at the Allianz Arena in Munich, which is the home of Bayern Munich. My name is Martin Geier. I'm the Managing Director for AWS in Germany. With me today is Andy Jassy. Andy is the Senior Vice President for Amazon Web Services. If you have questions to Andy, please send them along via email at aws-pr@amazon.com. We'll try to answer as many as we can. So welcome, Andy.
Thank you. It's great to be here from Munich.
So what brings you to Germany today?
Well, I'm very excited to announce AWS's 11th region around the world, which is our EU Frankfurt region, which launches now, today. And just to clarify what a region means, because it's a little bit different for AWS than other folks, is that a region is a physical place in the world where we have multiple data centers and availability zones. And so our Frankfurt region, what that means is that customers will be able to store their data and use infrastructure from here in Germany. And it's a region that runs on carbon neutral power. And we will have multiple availability zones right from the start. And as I said earlier, it's available right now.
That's exciting news, Andy. So why specifically did you choose Germany for the new region?
There were 3 primary reasons why we chose Germany. The first is that we have thousands of AWS customers here in Germany who've been using AWS from other regions, primarily our other EU region in Ireland. And a lot of those customers have asked us to have a region here in Germany because they have other workloads they'd like to move to AWS but feel they can't do so until there's infrastructure here in Germany. So that was the first reason. The second reason is that we have a lot of large European customers who have some applications that they'd like to architect across multiple regions, but keep it in the EU. And before, we only had an EU region in Ireland, so now with our Germany region, they can use the multi-region capability that we provide now with 2 regions and keep their application all within the EU. And then the third thing is that our business in Europe has been growing so dramatically that we really needed another region to balance that growth. And when we looked at places for where to have this second region in Europe, Frankfurt was very attractive to us, both because it has great networking connectivity to most of the major cities in Europe, but also for the first 2 reasons I stated. So it was a real natural to do the region here in Frankfurt.
Right. So security and data privacy is on everybody's mind these days, especially here in Europe. And I feel not all of our customers really understand what we do to safeguard customer data. Can you shed some light on this, please?
Sure. Security is the first priority for AWS. We drop everything we're working on if we think we need to do anything to strengthen it. And as such, we've been using all the same strategies and tactics that big technology companies have used over the last 30 years. We have very strict physical access control to our data centers. We're very careful to make sure that there's no network intrusion for our customers. When our customers stop using various AWS services, we're very disciplined about wiping that hardware clean. But on top of that baseline, we also add a number of capabilities that make a lot of our customers feel like they have a better security posture in the cloud than they had before on premises. So we have very fine-grained access control in our identity and access management offering that lets customers set up sub-accounts with different credentials for those sub-accounts, and they can set up fine-grained permissions on who can use which services and which functions within those services, and under what conditions can they use those functions. We provide multi-factor authentication for customers who want to protect their accounts beyond just password and email address. And then, a couple of the reasons why people think that their security posture improves in AWS relative to on-premises is, first, we have such a large team that we've hired for security, given the scale of our business, that it's a lot larger than what any one company can really afford to do on their own. So our customers get the benefit of that large security focus, as well as the very large ecosystem of customers who give us feedback, and then all of our customers enjoy those features as we launch them during the year. But also, if you talk to CIOs and enterprises, they always talk about the canonical server under the desk problem, where over time, server sprawl has happened, and it's really hard to figure out where all the servers are. And they're always worried about who may have a server and that it may be doing something malicious and they don't know about it. Well, in AWS, you can make a single API call and know where all your servers are, who's checked them out, what they're doing with them. We also have services like AWS CloudTrail, which is a capability that shows where every one of your API calls came from, who made it, what resources they tried to change, and then were they effective in changing any of those resources. That's the type of visibility that's not so easy to have on premises. And then I think it's important to also understand how customers are able to control data on AWS. And it's really important. Customers own their data, and they control what happens to their data. So they can store their data in any of our 11 regions they choose. That data won't move unless customers choose to move it. We don't look at the data. It just looks like a blob to us. And our customers who are extra concerned about data privacy encrypt their data. So that even in the odd chance anybody was able to have access to that data, they couldn't do anything with it because it's encrypted and they hold the keys. So we are compliant with all the European data privacy laws, and we know this issue is very important for customers, and we're very focused on it.
That's excellent. So you were touching on this in your answer already, but very specifically, personal data and sensitive data is a major concern of enterprises, particularly in Europe here. So can you give us a few examples of enterprise customers that process these kind of data on AWS?
Sure. Well, again, most customers, most of our enterprises who really care about this data privacy issue encrypt their data. And we give them multiple ways to encrypt data. So they can use the encryption that comes with all of our storage and database services, and AWS can manage the keys for our customers. Or if our customers want to manage those keys themselves, they use our Cloud HSM, or hardware security module, to keep the keys themselves. Nobody has any access to it. If anybody tries to access it who doesn't have permissions, it's tamper-proof. The box will shut down. So customers have a lot of flexibility in how they encrypt. And you've seen lots of large enterprises in highly regulated industries storing sensitive data on top of AWS. So I'll give you some examples. Here in Germany, the large insurance company Talanx runs their software assessment software for Solvency II on top of AWS. And so Solvency II requires that companies are able to put all of their customer policies in a mathematical formula, and then they have to make sure they could pay off their debts if they all got called at once. And so Talanx runs these calculations for lots of customers, and they run that on top of AWS, and the calculations take 75% less time than when they ran them on premises. They're saving 60 to 70% on costs relative to on-premises, and they're saving over 8 million euros a year right now. Or you can look at the largest insurer in Spain, MAPFRE. They run their solvency calculations for their own company on top of AWS, and they're saving 9 times what it cost before when they were running on premises. You can see it in the financial services industry. So the Dutch financial bank actually blessed and certified AWS for financial institutions in the Netherlands to run their workloads on top of, and it's enabled companies like Robico to run their retail banking platform on top of AWS. You can see it in the telecom industry. If you look at Vodafone in Italy, they have an app that allows customers from various mobile devices to be able to top up their account with a credit card or other payment instruments, and they run that on top of AWS in a PCI-compliant way. You can see it in the UK with the Rail Settlement Plan, which is the ticketing function for all the railways in the UK, and they're running that on top of AWS, and it's got data not just about customers but also about all the different paths they're traveling on, so they can settle with the various railway owners. And again, you can see it all over. You can see it even in utilities like British Gas, who has built an application that allows customers to control their heating remotely from various mobile devices. Companies of all sizes and all industries, even very highly regulated industries, are running sensitive workloads on top of AWS.
Oh, these are impressive examples. So cloud computing has been considered transformational. Why is this the case, Andy?
I think there are a few reasons that our customers consistently tell us that the cloud has completely changed their business. The first is, if you can trade capital expense for variable expense, for most companies it's very attractive. Not having to lay out that capital up front for servers and data centers before you know what's going to happen with that project is very useful, and to only have to pay as you consume it. So you get to turn capital expense to variable expense. And then that variable expense is less on AWS than what the vast majority of companies can do on their own. And that's because AWS takes its very large scale and passes that on to customers in the form of lower prices. You get elasticity in the cloud. So you don't have to provision for the peak and then sit on that wasted capacity if you're not always running at that peak. You seamlessly scale up as demand dictates, and then when you don't need that peak anymore, you scale down and stop paying for it. Companies are much more agile when they run on the cloud, and this is a really important point, and this is probably the single most important point to enterprises. So if you talk to an engineering leader at an enterprise and ask how long does it take to get a server to try something, you usually get answers between 10 and 18 weeks. And if you think about it, it's maddening. If you're an engineering team, you just stop trying to think about new ideas, because why bother? It's going to take so long to try an experiment. And God forbid, if you're successful, how you're going to get more servers for the rollout is hard to fathom as well. And any company that does a lot of invention will tell you that the two most important things are, number one, being able to try a lot of experiments, and number two, if those experiments fail, and many should if you're pushing the envelope, not having to live with the collateral damage of those failed experiments. And in the cloud, you can spin up thousands of servers or instances in minutes. And then if your experiments don't work, you either give them back and stop paying for them or reuse them for other experiments. So you can deploy much more quicker. And because of the really fully featured and robust technology infrastructure platform that AWS has, it means that engineering teams don't have to rebuild all the infrastructure services, which is another reason why they can get from idea to market so quickly. So the agility is a big deal. And then the last thing I'd point out is that in most companies, the scarce resource are software development engineers. And companies have to constantly make unhappy decisions that are or decisions. Which one are they going to do of these three projects? It's very hard to predict ahead of time which are going to be the most successful. And if you can take that scarce resource, your engineers, and instead of having them manage the infrastructure, which is important, but it hardly ever differentiates your business in any meaningful way, and instead have that scarce resource work on what really differentiates your mission or your business, that's a huge advantage. So I think that's the set of benefits that are so compelling and why people are moving to the cloud in such large numbers so quickly.
Got it. Exciting. So again, if you have questions, please submit them to aws-pr@amazon.com. How are we doing on questions? Thank you. All right, so there's one for you. What if the US government wants to access my data? That's a question we have here.
It's a good question. It's a question we get asked a lot in Europe and a lot in Germany. The first thing I'd say, most enterprises that care deeply about this issue encrypt their data. And if you encrypt your data and you hold the keys, this is a non-issue. But I'll answer the question nonetheless, which is if any government, whether it's the U.S. government or a European government or a government from somewhere else around the world, asks for data from AWS, customer content, the first thing we do is we don't respond unless it's a court-ordered, legally binding request. So it has to be a subpoena or a court order. And in the odd cases where we get a legally binding request, the next thing we check is whether or not it's accurate or whether or not it's overreaching. And we challenge very aggressively requests that are overreaching because we advocate very passionately for our customers. And in the odd cases where it's a legally binding order and it's not overreaching, we'll then tell our customers as law permits so they have a chance to advocate on their own behalf. And this is a topic that is really interesting to talk about, but in practice hasn't affected our customers or our platform at all, both because customers can encrypt, so it becomes a non-issue, and just because it just hasn't been an issue to date. And you could ask any of our customers, it just has not been something that people on our platform have had to deal with.
Got it. Great. Any more questions? There's another one. What is AWS doing to support hybrid computing?
Well, increasingly, if you look at what's happening with enterprise adoption of AWS, you're seeing more and more enterprises move large workloads and large groups of workloads to AWS. And almost every week, somebody on my team tells me about a new enterprise that's going all into AWS. But there are also a lot of enterprises that have on-premises data centers that they're not ready to retire and won't retire for several years for a variety of different reasons. And that's also okay. What they really want from AWS is they want a way to run those on-premises data centers alongside AWS in as seamless a way as possible. And we have been investing over the last several years in a number of capabilities that we've provided for customers that allow them to do it. And we have lots of customers, lots of enterprises who are running in hybrid mode on top of AWS and their on-premises data centers. And so, for instance, we have a service called Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, or VPC, which allows customers to effectively cordon off a part of our network, deploy resources into that VPC, and then you can set up subnets in that VPC, and you can choose whether you want those subnets addressable via IP addresses that those companies bring to bear, or whether you want some subnets addressable via the internet. And then it connects via VPN to their own data centers. So our VPCs really become an extension of a customer's own data center topology. Or we have a service called Direct Connect that allows customers to have a private connection between their data centers and AWS regions. Or for a long time, we've had a storage gateway appliance that allows customers to store hot objects that are accessed frequently on premises, and then separately store the colder objects, or even the hot ones that they want to just store for archival purposes asynchronously to the AWS cloud, and then stores them in a format where they can spin them up and run them on instances for disaster recovery. Or just recently, a few days ago, we launched the AWS Directory service that allows customers to run their Active Directory databases or even their own identity databases on top of AWS that connects with their on-premise capabilities. So we have a number of capabilities in the hybrid space, and you should expect us to continue to iterate and deliver for our customers in this space.
Awesome. Thank you. Now here's one more for you. Can AWS afford to continue to lower prices?
Well, I think if you look at the history of AWS since we launched 8.5 years ago, and what we've consistently told customers, we believe that cloud computing is going to be a high-volume, relatively low-margin business. And as such, we believe that prices are going to continue to go down every year. And I think if you look at AWS's pricing actions over the last 8.5 years, it's been reflective of that. We've lowered our prices on 45 different occasions in the last 8.5 years, largely in the absence of any competitive pressure to do so. And I think you should expect that to continue. I've looked at analyses of our AWS business every which way you could imagine. And I can tell you that we are really excited and really pleased with where the business is and strongly believe it will be a significant free cash flow generating business for years to come.
Got it. So it looks like we are running out of time. So I want to ask you one final question. We've seen multiple players in the technology space enter the cloud computing arena recently. So can you tell us what is different with AWS?
Well, from the time that we started working on AWS, which was 11 years ago, and when we wrote the vision document for it, we always expected there would be a lot of companies pursuing this. And that's because the value proposition for customers is so strong that we expected customers would adopt this offering, and if they adopt it at the rate that they have, which is aggressively, that there would be a lot of companies that wanted to participate. I think one of the biggest surprises for us in the first 8.5 years of operating AWS is just how long it took for other companies to launch offerings. I don't think any of us ever expected to have a 6-year head start. But there are some pretty significant differences in the offering. The first, I would say, is that AWS has been doing this for the longest. We were the pioneer in this space, and we're the clear leader. And we launched this business and started working on it about 11 years ago because we had to get really good at running infrastructure services deep in the stack and reliable, scalable, cost-effective data centers just to scale Amazon the retailer the first 10 years of the business. But I can tell you, 8.5 years after being in the market with hundreds of thousands of customers all over the world in every imaginable use case, we are much better at this today than we were before. There just is no compression algorithm for experience, and you can't learn the lessons that we've learned until you get to certain elbows of the curve and scale. And we just don't have other players who've reached that elbow of the curve and scale yet. So one is experience. Two is we just have a lot more functionality than any other provider by a large amount. We have many more services. We have many more features within those services. And then we're also iterating at a faster clip than anybody. So, for perspective, in 2012, this is 5 years after we've been in the business, we launched what we considered 159 significant services and features. In 2012, that number was 280. This year, year to date, it's 350, and we expect the end of the year that it'll be over 400. And so we have a lot more functionality, and then we're also iterating at a much faster clip than anybody else. The fourth thing I'd say is when you're making a big technology shift like the cloud, and I think the cloud is the biggest technology shift of our lifetime, customers want to make that transition with a large ecosystem of partners to help them. And if you look at the thousands of systems integrators who have built practices on top of AWS and the thousands of ISVs who have built their software and adjusted their software so it runs on top of AWS's technology infrastructure platform, we just have a much more vibrant and large partner ecosystem than anybody out there. And then the last thing I'd point to is just, I think AWS has a different philosophy around costs than the traditional technology companies. And I think if you look at the last 20 years, the traditional older guard technology companies have really charged customers as much as they were willing to pay. And they very infrequently looked for opportunities to take their prices down. And that is a completely reasonable business strategy, and it's been successful for some of those companies for a period of time. It just isn't our strategy. Everything we do at Amazon starts with the customer and moves backwards from there. All the strategies and tactics move backwards from there. And I've been at Amazon for 17.5 years now, and I've worked on all of our businesses, and I have yet to meet a customer who wants to pay more. And so if you're customer focused, when you can take cost out of your own cost structure, instead of pocketing that as profit, you give it back to customers in the form of lower prices. And that's what we've done on 45 different occasions in the first 8.5 years that we have been operating the business. I think also, as I mentioned earlier, we have this very strong perspective that in the future, very few companies will own their own data centers. And those that do will have much smaller footprints than they have today. And so all of that computing is moving to the cloud. And if you believe that, then I think it also stands to reason that this is going to be a high-volume, low-margin business. And if you think about Amazon, every business we're in is a high-volume, low-margin business. We like those types of businesses. We're comfortable with those types of businesses. And we have those operating skills to run those types of businesses. I think the large technology companies aren't as excited about those types of businesses. And I think it's one of the main reasons why they pushed the private cloud so hard the first 6 years that we were in business was the private cloud doesn't disrupt their existing business in any meaningful way. It's the same margin structure, same high margin structure. But as customers have voted with their workloads and AWS has grown so fast, every large technology company in the world now is marching as fast as they can to build a copy of what AWS has been building. And it'll be interesting to see, as those businesses get started, how effective they'll be at running these high-volume, low-margin businesses, because you don't flip a switch overnight and acquire those types of operating characteristics. They're built up over time.
Got it. Very exciting. So, Andy, thank you so much for coming to Munich. The team is excited here. I know from conversation with customers in Germany and across Europe, they will be excited about these news. So thank you very much for joining. And for the questions we were unable to answer, the team will come back later to you on that one. And meanwhile, Frankfurt region is live now. So if you want to log on, aws.amazon.com/de. We're ready to go when you are. Thank you very much again. We're excited. And a greeting from Germany, die Cloud ist in Deutschland angekommen. Thank you so much.